Yes. So you touched a little bit about um, in bringing ERC 721 together, uh, you know, corralling open source communities. How did you first get exposed to that? I guess, you mentioned BBSs, which were like a prototypical type of open source community, but like, yeah, how did you get engaged with them over time, and what are your core principles? Because you have a really active GitHub with all kinds of stuff ranging from, I don't know, things for radios to apps to, yeah, I guess somewhere in there, your Solidity Hello World
So my first
contract.
experience
Yeah.
with open source with Linux in high school. So a friend who now also works at Google got me onto, it was either Red Hat or Gentoo or something, or whatever the other version of Red Hat was called back then. And Fedora? No, it was before Fedora. And this is my first experience with open source. So I had a computer, it was running Windows, and I decided I'm gonna scrap it and I'm gonna do Linux. And there's an XKCD for this, but basically it gets worse and worse as you're installing it, and like not even attacking you. And this is what happened to me. So I'm trying to install Linux, but halfway through, I realized that I didn't have internet access because the module, the kernel module for the Ethernet driver didn't work. And it was the RT87 something, a really 8739, a really popular Ethernet driver. And I had that card. I didn't have like this weird card. I had a popular card, and for some reason it didn't work. And I had taken C in school. It was just enough programming that I knew on this day to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. So I'm literally, so my first experience with open source is I'm literally compiling the kernel. It didn't work, and it spits out a wall of errors, just like blah, 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 blah. So I scrolled up and I found the first error. I'm like, well, that's the one that I need to fix. And it was magical that it's worked out this way, but I actually fixed the problem. There's a typo in one of the pre-compiler directives, one of the include statements, that on this architecture, because I had like the i686 and there's the i586, whatever it was, and I just fixed one of the things and it compiled and I got on the internet. And then I said, okay, well, I fixed the thing and I wrote down what it is that I fixed. And I said, okay, well, I guess what I'm supposed to do is share the fix. So I got on the internet, I did all my like computer setup stuff on Linux, and then I found the project, which was a mailing list, or it was either a mailing list or an IRC back then. And then I went in there and I found the maintainer for whatever this module was. And I said, hey, I would like to contribute this fix. And then here's the thing that it was, and here's what it is. And I didn't use a patch. I didn't know how the right way to articulate what I was doing. I said, here's the fix, and it worked for me. And I said, and I included it in the Linux kernel. So my first contribution on OSS was getting a commit into the kernel, which is ridiculous nowadays. But and it worked. So I'm not saying like how awesome it was. It was really just a one-line fix. But the story is that I got the whole closed loop. So I had the problem, I fixed it. I was lucky enough that I could figure it out. It worked. I got online. I was still using Linux. I found the person. I let them know. They accepted it, and they put it in the new version of Linux. That is the cycle that you need for open source. That's the whole point. And that was the first thing that I learned. I didn't ever study. I actually have a book now on open source, whatever, but from business school. But it's like, that's the whole point. It's like when you learn religion, they say the whole point of, I don't know if this is a Jewish quote or something, but it's the whole point of religion is love. I don't know who I'm quoting on this, but
every religion.
Every religion. So if you understand love, then you're basically done with religion. And religion is a process to teach you love. So that's the thing. So I just skipped all of the religion part and I went straight to the love, because that was the cycle. That was the loop, the whole thing. And I said, okay, well, this is the future of technology, collaboration, working across borders. Remember, this is also back 90s or something. You didn't have pen pals across borders. You talked to people that you knew back then. So this is me talking to a stranger far away on a different time zone. Like all those elements lined up. And then I realized this is what the future's like. This is what science is like. and it's fast. The whole thing is you don't have to be you don't have to be an expert to do science. You don't have to be published. You don't have to be in a journal to do science. You just have to follow this process, and this is science. So for me, the understanding of science was getting this one line of code fix in the Linux kernel, and then I took this experience forward for everything with open source.
Yeah. And I guess like open source has evolved since then. What is the process like today? I mean, I guess that general loop is the same, but I'm sure like things have evolved. Projects tend to be much more, or many of them are much more organized. There's a lot of kind of norms and complexities that have popped up.
I think very little has changed since decades ago of open source. Maybe more people are using GitHub than mailing lists, for better and worse. It's a lot. I really don't think the process has changed. I'm going to say it like this: it has not changed at all. It's just that more people are aware of it now. And with the awareness is bringing more contributors. So there's lots of casual contributors, people that are not going to make a career in software, contributing to software, more tinkering, people that want a thing, but they don't want to wait for the software to come out. Like, let's talk about AI. So there's a lot of people, or AI. There's a lot of people that want to do AI, machine learning, people that want to do neural network programming, and the tools aren't out yet. The consumer tools are just not there yet. So they have to follow some guide in order to get it to work. Like that level of engagement is bringing people in that are not, let's say, professional contributors to these type of projects. In the past, there were a lot more professional contributors. Now there's a lot more casual people. So the people have changed. The process, the technology is identical. There's different names we were using. CVS, then we were using Subversion. Now we're using Git. Probably going to use Git forever. But they're the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So basically, nothing's changed.
The people have changed.
Yeah, the people have changed. And where do you see it going? Do you see open source eating the world? There's and there's this debate now that we're on the AI stuff, open models versus proprietary models.
Yeah, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that Google leaked memo, but that's the one.
I didn't say it. You said it.
There you go. So there's a leaked memo from Google discussing the comparison of, basically it says that the future of neural network products is going to come from open source. Open source is eating Google's lunch. There's really no path forward for Google to make a competitive product when the progress from the open collaboration world is 10x faster. And it goes to market way faster. Some people, I remember a long time ago, sometimes communism was attached to open source. They were saying that it's the communist approach and the closed source software is the capitalist approach. Because if you look at the word capitalism, capital means you're going to create an asset that's valuable, capital, and you're going to derive a profit from that asset. But open source software is free, therefore it is not an asset that you own. It kind of lines up. That open source is communism and products, but
well, socialism may be more apt.
But, and this is just from long ago. This is the way that people are talking about it. Nobody talks like this anymore. Nobody says that anymore. And we're just focused on the outcomes, not the ideology, not the why are people doing it this way. It's just, it is way more effective. It is 10x more effective every time. The products are better. It brings people in faster. And so you just need to adapt to that. You need to make businesses that thrive in this future rather than making businesses that suck. And again, that's why I left Google, is because they don't know how to make businesses. They've only ever made one product that works, and they're just not business people. They didn't figure this out. Luckily, this leaked memo shows that somebody in there has a brain and is thinking about, how how can we adapt to this future? How can we be alive in this future where open source software is the path forward? And Google, who invested a crazy amount of money in neural networks with the TensorFlow processing unit, like they made their own silicon even before Apple brought it to the masses, still couldn't get an edge.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how all this stuff plays out. I think there's I mean, there are definitely like counter arguments to what you described, and I do tend to think that like there's something about if you're doing enterprise stuff that it's like companies how they make decisions on service providers and like what they trust. If there's a customer service engineer they can talk to, like those kinds of things make a difference, because that ends up like what's in, the back end to the big consumer products that, everybody's using. And I still don't know, like I go back and forth, proprietary versus open source. You kind of implied that, or kind of assented to my idea that, is open source eating the world or going to eat the world?
But yeah, the answer is yes. Open source eats the world. And also your question before, or your comment before about, companies need services. Companies need customer support. That's the answer. Open source doesn't do customer support. And there is room for businesses. There's room for making money. There's room for building brands that is compatible with open source software. The way that software is going to work, software is a open source thing that is eating the world. And I'll give you two examples that you're saying, haven't we been saying this forever? So I'll give you those two examples of where they're great examples. Okay, so the one, now back to the business. So yeah, so the future of, it's really not about the future of software. Nobody cares about software. People care about products. People care about business. And so yeah, the future of business is not to be replaced by open source. That doesn't make sense. You're not going to start buying your office software from a bunch of people that don't answer your phone call when things break. Like that's not what companies do. So they need support, even if the support is terrible and it's delivered by underqualified people. Like even the worst possible imaginable support, as long as it's better than an AI chatbot, as long as it's a real human, even subpar, then they will pay for that. So
for now.
Right. But for businesses, that there's definitely, you're paying for the brand. The product, it doesn't really matter if the product is capitalism owned by the company, or socialism, communism owned by some community. That doesn't matter. People don't care about that philosophy. They care about the product. And so yeah, businesses that work with open source will thrive. Now the question is, have we been saying this forever? One of the quotes is this the year of the Linux desktop? This is the year that Linux takes over Windows. This is the year that Linux takes over Windows. And then in all this time people have been talking about this, Mac just took over everything. So Apple took over everything.
With Unix.
Right, with Unix. So there's really two things that people have been saying forever, two really out there projects from GNU, which is with Richard Stallman, who's just so communist or whatever on the other side of everything, that just really strives to connect to the real world. Two of the things from the GNU world were GNU Herd. So is GNU Herd going to be the future? The new operating system from scratch, built under open source, without any influences from the outside world. And it was based on microarchitecture. This is a technical decision. And basically the end result is this is what Apple now uses. So this whole magical product that people wanted is now used by the whole world, billions of people, because Apple brought it forward. And Apple's kind of their walled garden approach, but they do make the minimum amount of improvements to open source that they can. They also have managed to keep a lot of things private. but all the ideas were stolen anyway because they went to Android with the same ideas. And the second thing, which just happened this year, is so many people were thinking, oh, there's another project called GNU Social, which is a new social network based on magical open platforms that are just interoperable and perfect, like email, and not subject to the influences of the powers that be. And this week, a major company in this industry launched a product that supposedly will be compatible with this in the future. So GNU Social became, and Pump was one of the programs that did this. Basically, we have something called ActivityPub now, which is a potential competitor to social networks out there. And this is the open source design and intercompatible and all of these things. And now Meta comes out with Threads that purports to be compatible with this. So these are two major achievements in the open source world that people thought would take decades to come. And it just happens to be that this is the decade that they came. So yes, we have been saying it forever. And now we need new goals to aspire to because the goals that we've been working on have been achieved. But no, it does not make businesses obsolete or money obsolete or any of that stuff.
Yeah. Great. One last thing I wanted to make sure we cover was you and I do this community service hour that we co-host every week. And I've never asked you, what do you get out of that experience? And how do you think your live streaming skills have developed over the course of?
Well, I get a lot out of it. It's a nice way to connect with people, is to have a public show. I do advisory, so I help businesses implement a lot of the stuff we're talking about, and that's I make money off of that. And so it's a nice differentiator. Do you want to have a private conversation where you're going to be paying me, or do you want to have a public conversation where I'm going to publish it? And that's a nice differentiator because a lot of people, are businesses that don't want to pay for things. So making it public is a real easy way to just differentiate the community world versus the work world. And more businesses should just show up and get the advice for free on the call, just run with it. But a lot of businesses would
don't tell anyone.
Be private. Like my idea is so secret. Like your idea, there's 10 other people that have the same idea. It's the ideas are not special. It's the execution that's special. So for me, it's very nice to separate those two parts of who I talk to. The clients and the private stuff versus the public stuff that I publish. That's a tangible value. I mean, I talk to a lot of people and I get quite a bit of DMs, and I don't like saying no to people when they want help. If I can help people, especially if it's part of my vision that I'm trying to change the world, I want to help people. And putting that into a 1 hour box each week really helps me clear up my week and stay focused. So that's a very practical thing. Two is it's helping me to make some blog posts, to articulate better some of these ideas. We have had a couple of these themes on the community service hour where the themes come along a few times. One of them is like, blockchain is not decentralized. Something people don't understand. And so we've touched it a few times, but eventually we've said enough that it can be a blog post. Right. And that is the word on the subject. So it's nice as a column to bring themes up over and over. Plus it's just the way that people work. Is really the way that you achieve solutions to just talk about something and make it, or talk about something and then publish a blog? No, these are discussions. As you bring in more people, we've got a crew, we've got a dedicated, faithful crew of people that show up, and they're just different perspectives. Neural networks, one of the great things that will come from neural networks is simulating different perspectives. That's a major thing that will come out. If you've got we talk about diversity, and Harvard had a major lawsuit about diversity, and that one just cleared through the Supreme Court. And then the next day, a second one came, continuing that angle. So diversity is a great thing. You can simulate some of it, so you can just bring people into your meeting with extremely diverse opinions. And but we do that automatically with community service hour. I'm not replacing these people with robots, but we get some really diverse opinions from all parts of life and humanity in that call. And it's great. It's great because you really need that to get to where you're going. So same thing. If you're publishing products yourself or you're writing blog posts, there's a proclivity to just go off your own angles. But if you have a weekly call, if you have this bouncing back, you've really exposes you to the diversity of ideas that you need to get better. That's what I get out of it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I get a lot of those things too.
Maybe last thing that, like, how should folks follow you and hear more about you, like what you do, and then keep following you and interact with you?
Following's easy. So I have a website called 4.net. Can I type here? Boom.
Sure.
So there's that.
And we'll share that in the description as well. Yeah.
Yep. So 4.net, there's a bunch of places you can click follow and a bunch of those things. There's an email list that's, you get an email once a month from me to just summarize all that stuff. But better is, I want to hear from you, more alpha from me, right? So show up, ask your questions, introduce yourself. That's really the whole point. I think following is overrated. Interacting is underrated. So show up. I have the community service hour. Just bring in all these topics are in scope. Don't be shy. Just show up and, bring your perspective on this stuff. I'm here to help you. I'm here to push my vision forward and then, expand what I know too. So there's that too. So we've got that. That is, there's hour.gg, hour like a minute hour, community service hour. So hour.gg. And yeah, be in touch.
All right. Yeah. Just don't forget to check them out. We will also leave in the description. Also, like, we'll tweet about them as well. Yeah. And all right. So wrap it up. Our guest today has been William Entriken. And Will, thanks for being part of the craft, and really appreciate it and learn a lot from you. And also for those of you who are listening, and thank you for listening to the Craft Podcast. And for more links and information about this episode, or to listen to more episodes, you can search for the Craft Podcast by Daniel Tedesco and Michael Du on YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcast. And see you next time. And until then, keep crafting.